Dick York played Darin Stephen in Bewitched, which first aired in 1964. He was just a typical man, but his wife Samantha, played by Elizabeth Montgomery, was something far from typical. She was a closeted spell-casting witch with a knack for getting into trouble. All Darrin ever wanted was to live a normal life, but Samantha didn't divulge her magical ways until after their marriage. The couple made an agreement to not disclose to friends, family, or anyone else the fact that she was a witch, and she even promises her husband she will not practice her witchcraft, a promise that would be consistently hard for her to keep, as she regularly found herself getting into tight spots and sticky situations. On top of that, Samantha's magical family becomes increasingly more at odds with the couple's mixed marriage, and they make repeated attempts to sabotage their marriage and lives. Much of the plot was pretty repetitious, typically involving some kind of spell cast upon Darrin by a disgruntled witch or warlock that Samantha is then forced to try and cover up so as not to blow their cover. The show proved to be quite popular, airing for 254 episodes over a span of 8 seasons. But even if you're a fan of Bewitched, we're guessing there are a bunch of things you never knew about the show. For example, Dick York abruptly left the show due to some very unfortunate circumstances. In this video, we'll take a look at what caused his sudden departure, as well as some other behind-the-scenes facts you might not know about Bewitched. Factsverse presents The Sad Reason Dick York Left Bewitched. Before we dive into the old cauldron, make sure you remember to hit like and to subscribe to our channel. Then tap the notification bell to make sure you never miss another one of our videos. Saul Sachs, the creator of Bewitched, drew inspiration from 2 films. In fact, Saul was pretty frank when discussing the creative origins of Bewitched. One movie he borrowed heavily from was 1942's I Married a Witch, which, as you can probably guess by the title, followed a premise that was similar to the Bewitched plot. That film itself was based upon a novel by Thorne Smith entitled The Passionate Witch. Another flick that was influential was the 1958 film Bell, Book and Candle. In this film, we have a modern-day witch who finds herself smitten by her next-door neighbor, but absolutely despises his fiancée. She casts a spell on him to fall in love with her instead, but she then can't help but fall for him herself. Saul didn't fear any lawsuits or such for his derivative work, as both films were owned by Columbia, the parent company of Screen Gems, the company that produced Bewitched. Sachs wanted Tammy Grimes to play Samantha. In 1961, Tammy took in the Best Actress Tony Award for her work in The Unsinkable Molly Brown. She was signed on with Screen Gems and was going to be the first suggestion for the lead role of Cassandra, or Samantha as she would later be renamed. They ran into a bit of a problem, though. Grimes totally hated the premise of the show. She wondered why her character wouldn't solve some of the world's real problems with her powers like war or global hunger, or even why she couldn't wiggle her nose just to get through LA traffic. So she decided to sign on to the Broadway play High Spirits instead. That's when Elizabeth Montgomery was recast into the show. The rest is history. Darrin was almost played by Richard Krane. Montgomery and her husband at the time, William Asher, were both poking around looking for a project they could work on together. Harry Ackerman pointed them in the direction of the Bewitched pilot, and Elizabeth and William saw a lot of potential in it, so they too signed on. This was still during the time when Grimes was slated to play Samantha, but that spot would soon be filled by Miss Montgomery. Richard Sargent was being looked at to play Darrin at first, but he decided to take another job. Oddly, he would go on to play Tammy Grimes' twin brother on her short-lived sitcom, The Tammy Grimes Show. Next up in consideration for the part of Darrin was Richard Krane, but he had just gotten off the set of The Real McCoys and needed some time off, so he too passed on the role. Finally, Dick York wowed producers with his impressive laundry list of credentials and accolades and landed the part. Dick York had to leave the show because of an old injury. Dick York starred in 1959's They Came to Cordura. Towards the end of the production on the film, Dick was operating a railroad handcar that was transporting a bunch of wounded extras. When the scene wrapped up and the director called cut, one of the men lifted themselves up on the side opposite of York using the handcar's handle. York, not anticipating the extra weight of the man on the handle perpendicular to the one he was pumping up and down, tore his back muscles on the right side and experienced spinal injury. This was an injury he would never heal from, and surgeons at the time had no remedy for. His doctors kept him on a steadily increasing dose of high-powered painkillers to curtail some of his discomforts. Despite his injuries, he pushed through it and worked anyways. During season 5, however, his pain was beginning to get the best of him. When they were filming the episode Daddy Does His Thing, he experienced a major breakdown that culminated in a seizure. This probably had a lot to do with the medication he was on, the hot lights of the set, and the major exhaustion he was going through. Simply put, he was worn thin, and that was the last straw. He was rushed to the hospital, and he would later recover, but he would never return to Bewitched. He would promptly be replaced by Dick Sargent. Elizabeth was pregnant for season 1's filming. To hide the fact she was increasingly more and more pregnant, she wore looser and looser clothing as the season carried on. She would later have 2 additional pregnancies while working on the show, but those would be written into the show's plotline. Eventually, that's how Tabitha and Adam became a part of the Stevens family. Elizabeth came up with the name Tabitha as her on-screen daughter. Miss Montgomery was inspired by the names of actor Edward Andrews' real-life daughters, Tabitha and Abigail. When producers were discussing potential names for her daughter in Bewitched, the first thing that came to her mind was Tabitha. She would be irked, however, when the name was credited as Tabitha but spelled differently on the credit roll. She said it was a fingernails on a chalkboard-like experience every time she saw it. Alice Pierce had terminal cancer when she signed on to the show. Miss Pierce played the part of the Stevens' nosy neighbor, Gladys Kravitz. She was well known for never leaving well enough alone and constantly prying too deeply into Samantha and Darrin's affairs. She was the bane of their existence in a way because she was nearly always foiling their plans and uncovering their secrets in very comedic ways. A couple of months before getting the call from her agent that Saul Sachs wanted her on the show, she found out she had ovarian cancer. She would have surgery, but it would prove to be ineffective. The cancer had spread too far and had indeed become terminal. She worked hard regardless on the show and kept her prognosis a secret until she passed away in March of 1966. Marion Lauren, aka Aunt Clara, was an avid doorknob collector. And you thought your hobbies were weird. Lauren played the bumbling but beloved witch Aunt Clara on Bewitched. Her character had a strange fixation with doorknobs throughout the show. That weird preoccupation was based upon the reality of Marion's real-life love affair for the objects. In fact, she had a collection of over 1,000 unique doorknobs tucked away at her estate. Sam's on-screen magic was made possible by stagehand ingenuity. Back in those days, you couldn't just resort to CGI every time you needed a flashy visual effect. So when they needed some special effects, they had to take on a more hands-on approach. So if there was a scene, for example, where Samantha would snap her fingers and the room would suddenly be clean, what was really happening is the director would yell cut. Montgomery had to hold the position she was in while stagehands quickly tidied up the room before the order was given to begin re-rolling. Action. Other crafty methods employed to conjure up some on-screen hocus-pocus included fast-forwarding and running the film backward for the desired effect, or employing the use of translucent, invisible wires to give the appearance of levitation. Small pyrotechnics were used to pop characters onto the set out of thin air, and when a character would magically change clothes, they had to leave their shoes in the exact position they were standing, so when they came back with a different wardrobe, they could pick up exactly where they left off. Well, that wraps up our look at some of the more obscure details of the TV show Bewitched. It's a shame how Dick York couldn't continue on with the show like that. Now, it's time to hear from you. Who was your favorite character in Bewitched? Everyone's go-to is the show's lead witchy woman Samantha, but we bet some of you are diehard Darrin fans. Let us know what you think in the comments section. And before you go, make sure to remember to like this video and subscribe to Facts First to see more videos like this.